Greetings and welcome to AmericaTV.me, powered by you. Today, we are going to focus on the higher education dialogue at the Capitol to see, as we approach the end of the legislative session, what's happening in terms of investment in the $1.5 trillion portfolio of our African, Latino, Asian, and Native American students. What I mean by that is if we take all the youth in school and the university system today, and if all of them get a BA's degree, their lifetime earning would be $1.5 trillion. And the college students currently in the system right now, an estimate is that they put in at least $1 billion in their own money on annual tuition payments. So it's a significant portfolio of investment before the legislature. They are stewards of this very important resource. And in testimony to the legislature, I identified four areas that make up a comprehensive strategy in higher education investment. First is affordability. The second is a multi-tiered support system. The third area is a culturally intelligent environment, learning environment, and shared governance. And the fourth area is a focus on academic outcomes and career outcomes at a disaggregated level. So, where are we in the legislature today as we seek investments in growing this 1.5 trillion Alana talent pool in Minnesota? Joining me today is our guest, uh, Leiataua Dr. Jon Peterson, who's also been following things in the legislature quite closely. Welcome to AmericaTV.me, Dr. Leiataua,
Yeah,
Dr. Peterson.
thank you, Dr. Corrie. Fafta Leiataua Manwia. Greetings and blessings to everyone out there watching the feed. Thank you for having me here today, Bruce. I really appreciate it.
Could you share a little bit about your interest in what's going on at the legislature in higher education?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Um, I'm a educator by background. Both of my parents were teachers. I was a teacher for a number of years, as well as an administrator. Most of my experience was in K-12, although I do have some experience in higher education as well. Over the last few years, through my business, TE2 Consulting, I've been working with a variety of clients, one of which is the Minnesota Education Equity Partnership, and helping to guide, coordinate, and at some level lead uh, reforms in higher education that create greater equity for all students, and more specifically, people of color, Indigenous, Alana, BIPOC students. At the legislature, we've been seeing quite a few different things. We do have, as folks know, a split legislature here in Minnesota. But we're not here today to be partisan and play partisan politics. More than anything else, we're here to talk a little bit about some of the proposals and provide a little deeper dive into some of the analytics associated with the fiscal policy and then the public policy in the current omnibus bill.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. When I look at the current omnibus bill before the legislature, I see some investments in each of these areas, whether it's from the House side or the Senate side. So I'm looking at the totality of the bill, of that omnibus bill. So in affordability, I see tuition scholarships for American Indian students. I see uh, state grant program, some focus on increasing the grant program. Um, in support services, I see some investments in mental health services. In the cultural environment area, I see some investments in the Teachers of Color program, and the Office of Higher Education has a very consistent focus on outcomes. So, at a broad level, I see some coverage in all these areas. What's your more in-depth look at what's going on?
Yeah, I think at a broad level, we really have to ask ourselves, not only this session, but in future sessions, what does a complete and comprehensive investment look like as it pertains to the state overall total budget comparative to what needs to be invested in higher education. And so the $1.5 trillion lifetime earnings, what sort of an investment is needed on the state side to be combined with the $1 billion in annual tuition payments to ensure that we get the results that we need for Minnesota to continue to be a vibrant a destination state and area for people to come and live and work and enjoy life. So I have some questions about just the overall investment strategy on the state side. However, with that said, as you mentioned, Bruce, the omnibus bill that's currently in conference committee that the conferees, the representatives and senators and chairs are talking about, does touch on each of these four different buckets that you have listed on the screen. One of the areas that I believe is incredibly important is investing in the state grant aid program, and that relates to fiscal policy. I'm a firm believer that whenever you have public policy, you have to back it up with some sort of a fiscal note in order for it to have both the support and the accountability teeth in it to make it really stick and work for students. And so I think that the 2-point reduction in the student responsibility is a smart move for the state of Minnesota, partisan politics aside. At one time, the state grant aid was not a 50-50 split. It was actually 48 on the student side and 52% on the state side. And so that was erased back about 15, 20 years ago. And now I think it's time for us to kind of move in a different direction with that. So I definitely support that aspect of the bill. And I believe that is in on the House language in terms of the side-by-side comparative of the two proposals. On the Senate side, I absolutely support, from a support services and also from an academic and career outcomes perspective, the notification process that's proposed in the Senate bill, stating that when a student hits a certain score on an assessment like the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment in college and career, potentially the reading and math assessments for the MCAs, possibly the SAT, the ACT. I'm of the opinion that students who hit a certain standardized benchmark score on any of those assessments should be exempted from having to take developmental education courses, what used to be called remedial education. And so what's happened in Minnesota is that in 2015, a bill was passed stating that very fact. Unfortunately, in the last 7 years, we haven't seen as many students avail themselves of that exemption because they're unaware of it. And their counselors in the secondary schools are unaware of it in many cases as well. And so one of the provisions that's in the bill in the Senate side is that institutions like colleges and universities are obligated to notify students that they're exempted from having to take developmental education. This will have a very positive benefit for students. One, we believe that GPA and a multiple measured approach in terms of assessment is a better indicator of future success in gateway college courses like math and English. And we also know that developmental education credits do not result in any credits toward graduation. And sometimes what happens is students end up spending money on those developmental education credits and they run out of state grant aid funds before they can graduate. All right, so want to be very clear, I am not anti-developmental education. I know that developmental education is very beneficial in many instances. And so one of the things that I support is co-requisite remedial, where you take a developmental education course or a support course in addition to a gateway course in math and or English. So without getting into the details too much, those are two areas that I think cross-cut a couple of these different buckets that I fully support.
Thank you. So I think those two areas you highlighted were important. What I would like to see at the end of this legislative session, if our Alana, African, Latino, Asian, Native American youth are investing $1 billion of their own money, and a lot of them, I see them in my classes, they are hardworking people. They're working in full-time, almost jobs in order to pay their bills, their expenses. and trying to get that complete education at a great at a normal pace. And so, if we were to just invest 10% of what they are investing themselves, that's $100 million, and see it in these four quadrants of investment, I think we would have progress, achieve much progress this legislative session, because we do have the resources now. Our human talent, a recent study, a national study, showed that where the human talent, the quality of the human talent uh, uh, gravitates towards, those places have a higher standard of living too.
Mhm.
And so the quality, we want the best and the brightest, and we want the quality of human talent in Minnesota to be exceptional. But in order to get there, we've got to invest in the educational infrastructure at a deeper level. So, any closing thoughts before we wind up this session?
Just one quick thought. A quick statistic that I'll share. A few years back, Policy Link came out with a study called "Equity is the Superior Growth Model in Minnesota." And what we know about the data is that the Twin Cities metropolitan area, which is a 14 county metro area, per capita has the second most Fortune 500 companies of any city and metropolitan region outside of New York City. And so our private businesses, in addition to the public sector, are hungry for educated, upskilled, degree holding, certificate holding, but preferably degree holding employees. And we know that an education not only has a democratizing impact on a society, in this case, the US society, but it's also good for business. It's also good for the bottom line to have well educated employees who are earning a family sustaining wage. And so, in that regard, I fully support the efforts that you've been putting out there, Dr. Corrie, as well as many other state partners. And I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Yeah,
Time.
thank you, Dr. Robert Jon Peterson, for your advocacy and your support for higher education. As I mentioned, it's good to see investments in policy and dollars in these four quadrants, but it's not at the level that we need to make a big difference in the quality of human capital that Minnesota can aspire to and can achieve in a highly qualified, talented work pool that we offer, especially in the condition of a severe labor shortage. We need the
Absolutely.
best and the brightest in Minnesota, and I hope that our leaders, elected leaders, will do the right thing. And after the legislative session, we'll come back again to
Yes.
evaluate. So, how did it all end, and are we in a good place? So, thank you very much for watching, everybody. This is AmericaTV.me, powered by you. Thank you.
Thank you.